Why was everyone staring at her? Maybe it was the helicopters. Maybe it was the way her name echoed through the sky, slicing through the ordinary noise of campus life like a blade. Sarah Donovan had no idea her quiet morning was about to end, that the life she tried to build from silence and distance would soon be dragged back into the shadows she thought she'd escaped. Moments before the thunder came, she had been just another freshman. She moved through the courtyard of Blackwood University with a notebook hugged to her chest, earbuds in, her mind somewhere between linguistics notes and a half-finished coffee. She liked the anonymity of it, the comfort of being unseen. Nobody looked twice at her. That was how she liked it. Ordinary was safety. Then came the sound, low at first, like distant thunder rolling over hills. Students glanced up, shielding their eyes. Sarah didn't. She froze. Something in that sound made her chest tighten, a vibration she knew too well. Rotor blades. The rumble grew louder, closer, until the air itself seemed to tremble. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Laughter died on lips. Phones came up instinctively to record what felt like a movie scene unfolding in real time. But it wasn't a movie. It was the past finding her. Blackhawk helicopters tore through the clouds, sunlight flashing off their metal skins. Leaves whipped into miniature storms as they descended, sending papers and coffee cups flying. The first one hit the quad like a thunderclap, blades carving chaos through the calm. Sarah stumbled back with everyone else, but when the loudspeaker boomed her name, time stopped. "Sarah Donovan, we need you now." Her name, shouted by soldiers, broadcast to thousands of watching eyes. Her notebook slipped from her hands, pages scattering across the grass. Every sound blurred except for her pulse hammering in her ears. Two operators emerged first, black gear, mirrored visors, weapons ready but not raised. Behind them, a commanding officer stepped down from the chopper, his stance calm, absolute. His gaze found her instantly, as if he'd known where she'd stand before he even landed. Students whispered, "Who is she? What's happening?" Phones kept recording. But Sarah barely heard them. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because deep down she knew. The officer's voice cut through the noise. "Miss Donovan, we're out of time. Come with us." It wasn't a question. Her feet felt rooted to the ground. The wind from the rotors hit her face, cold and biting. For one suspended heartbeat, she thought of running, to disappear, to vanish into the crowd. But a single look from the soldier nearest her told her what she already knew. There was no escaping this. She took one step, then another. The operators flanked her gently, forming a protective triangle as they guided her toward the waiting helicopter. Gasps rippled through the students. Cameras flashed. 100 lives kept on spinning, but Sarah's had just changed course forever. The world blurred into motion, noise, vibration, wind, and the sharp scent of aviation fuel. Inside the helicopter, the chaos outside became muffled. The metal walls hummed around her. Across from her sat the commanding officer, expression unreadable, eyes focused and searching. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "You know why we're here." Sarah shook her head, but the motion felt weak, unconvincing. She wanted to insist she was just a student, that they had the wrong girl, but her hands betrayed her. They trembled not from fear but from recognition. The hum of the engines, the vibration through the metal floor, it was familiar, too familiar. The officer leaned forward. "The jackal has resurfaced." Her breath caught, a name she hadn't heard aloud in years. He continued, voice low. "He's rebuilding his network. We intercepted a coded transmission this morning, the same encryption your mother designed before she was killed." Sarah's gaze dropped to the floor. Her mother's face flickered through memory, sharp eyes, calm voice, the smell of gun oil and coffee. Catherine Donovan, CIA operative, patriot, ghost. "She died protecting those codes," Sarah said quietly. The officer nodded. "And now those codes are back in enemy hands. You're the only one who can read them." The words hit like a blow. The only one. She looked up, eyes narrowing. "I'm not military." "Maybe not officially," he said, But your training says otherwise. Sarah looked away, the old scars tugging at her mind, the endless drills, the whispered lessons, her mother's voice repeating again, again, until muscle memory replaced thought. She buried all of it beneath years of normalcy. But memory doesn't die. It waits. Through the chopper's open side door, the campus shrank below, tiny figures waving, filming, gossiping. The last fragments of her ordinary life faded into distance. Ahead lay only clouds and the faint horizon. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Forward base in Greenland, then east." "Why me?" The officer met her eyes. "Because your mother trusted you with something she didn't trust anyone else. You have the cipher key, whether you realize it or not." Silence stretched between them. The steady thump of rotor blades filled it. She wanted to argue, to deny, but somewhere deep inside she felt it, that restless pull, the same instinct that had kept her alive once before. Her fingers drifted unconsciously to the small pendant around her neck, an old silver charm her mother had given her. Inside it, a folded microchip barely visible to the naked eye. Sarah had never told anyone it existed. She looked up slowly. "If I come with you, I want one thing." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "When this is over, you leave me out of the reports. My name stays buried." A pause, then a quiet nod. "Deal." The flight stretched into hours, daylight fading, replaced by the dim glow of red cabin lights. The soldiers around her stayed silent, checking weapons, reviewing maps, moving with the calm of men who had done this too many times before. Sarah watched them, studying every motion, the precision of it, the discipline. They reminded her of her mother's old team, the way they moved like one mind. She caught fragments of conversation through the radio, coordinates, call signs, a word that kept repeating: Reaper. When she finally asked, the officer answered simply: "It's the operation name. Project Reaper. Objective: cut off the jackal before he launches his digital strike. The files he's holding contain targeting protocols for 3 major networks. If he decrypts them, millions could die." Sarah stared out the window at the endless dark sky. "And you think I can stop that?" He held her gaze. "No, I know you can." The words landed heavier than any order. Not flattery, belief. Hours later, they refueled over Iceland, then pressed east toward the Arctic line. The engines groaned against cold winds, and Sarah's reflection in the window stared back, pale, tired, uncertain. She saw not the student anymore, but the shadow of the operative she once swore never to become. Somewhere below, ocean stretched black and endless. Her thoughts drifted back to childhood, her mother's hands guiding hers over a disassembled rifle, her whisper, "Courage isn't loud, Sarah, it's steady." She remembered the nights when training blurred into bedtime stories, when code sheets replaced fairy tales. A tear burned its way down her cheek before she could stop it. She turned away quickly, hiding it behind the hum of the cabin. The colonel, she hadn't asked his name yet, noticed anyway. "You okay?" She nodded, just remembering. "Good," he said quietly. "Hold on to that. Memory keeps us human out there." When they finally descended, the night outside was silver and blue. Snow stretched in every direction, reflecting moonlight like glass. The base looked carved out of ice, silent, isolated, alive with distant movement. They landed hard. The side door slid open and the cold hit her lungs like a slap. Soldiers spilled out, boots crunching through frozen powder, their breath fogging in the air. Sarah followed, pulling her coat tighter, eyes wide. The facility's lights cast long shadows across the runway. Inside, metal corridors echoed with hurried footsteps and clipped voices. Screens flickered with encrypted data. Everywhere she looked, there was motion, controlled chaos. A technician approached with a tablet, nodding toward her. "You must be Donovan." Sarah hesitated. "Was." He smiled faintly. "Right. Well, was or not, the colonel says you're the key. The files are locked with a hybrid cipher no one's cracked. Pattern origin matches your mother's old system. You'll need to see this. She followed him into a room lit only by the glow of monitors. The code filled every screen, rows of numbers, symbols, fragments of words. It looked like chaos, but something about it tugged at her. Hidden structure, familiar rhythm. Her heart picked up. She recognized it, not from textbooks, from memory. From childhood mornings when her mother would slide papers across the table and say, "Find the heartbeat in the numbers." She stepped closer. "It's layered," she whispered. "Dual key system, reversed phonetic root." The tech blinked. "You see that already." "I feel it," she murmured. Behind her, the colonel entered, folding his arms. "Then you're exactly where you need to be." Sarah turned slowly. "If I do this, it won't stop him, will it?" "No," he admitted, "but it'll tell us where he is." Her gaze lingered on the code. The lines blurred, resolving into patterns that only she could see. It wasn't just encryption, it was a message. Personal. Hidden beneath layers of algorithms was a phrase she hadn't seen in years. For S. Her throat tightened. Her mother had left her a trail. She exhaled, barely a whisper. She knew this day would come. The colonel's brow furrowed. "What?" Sarah looked up, eyes sharp now, resolve settling like steel. "He's not just after data. He's coming for something buried with her. My mother hid something the jackal never found, and now he's using her codes to find me." The colonel's expression darkened. "Then we move tonight." Sarah nodded slowly, fingers tightening on the table's edge. The fear that had haunted her for years began to twist into something else, purpose. She didn't know where this path would lead, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back. Outside, the wind howled across the snow-covered mountains, carrying the sound of distant engines preparing for flight. Sarah stared out the small window at the night sky. Somewhere, beyond that horizon, waited the man who had destroyed her family. And this time, she wasn't running. She stood by the window long after the others had gone, watching the snow swirl in soft spirals beneath the floodlights. The air outside looked calm, almost beautiful, but Sarah knew better. The calm before a storm was never peace, it was warning. She had lived that truth once before when her mother didn't come home, and now it felt the same. She pressed her palm against the cold glass. Her reflection stared back at her, pale, uncertain, eyes wide but alive. Somewhere deep behind them, a different woman waited. Not the freshman who studied languages and chased quiet mornings, but the shadow of the operative she had tried to forget. The one her mother had trained. The door behind her opened with a hiss. The colonel stepped inside, jacket zipped high, the kind of man who looked like he hadn't slept in days and didn't need to. He carried a small file and a silent urgency that filled the room. "We leave in 30, he said. "Destination." He laid the file on the table. Inside, satellite images, frozen ridges, black dots marking enemy structures, routes traced in red. Norwegian border, abandoned radar facility. It's his forward command. The jackal doesn't stay in one place long, but intel says he's there now. He's hunting the source code your mother buried. Sarah's fingers brushed the edge of the map. "And you think I can find it before he does?" "I don't think," he said quietly. "I know, and so did she." Her breath hitched at that. He looked at her for a moment longer, eyes softening. "I served with your mother once, briefly. She was different. Not because of skill, plenty had that, but because she cared about the cost of every life we risked. Most operatives don't. You remind me of that." Sarah lowered her gaze. "I'm not her." "No," he said, "but she made sure you could finish what she started." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Suit up. The world might never know what you do tonight, but some of us will never forget it." When he was gone, Sarah sat in silence, staring at the black tactical uniform folded neatly on the cot. The patches, the gear, the boots, they felt foreign and familiar all at once. Her hands trembled as she touched the fabric. It smelled of oil and cold metal. Memories flooded back, the sound of her mother's voice during drills, the sting of snow on her cheeks, the echo of a gunshot in the distance. She dressed slowly, methodically, each buckle and strap snapping into place like pieces of a past life reconnecting. When she slid the combat knife into its sheath, her throat tightened. It was the same knife her mother once carried, the initials KD faintly etched into the hilt. Down in the hangar, the team moved with quiet efficiency. Blackhawk rotors spun lazily, blades slicing through the night air. The men checked weapons, adjusted helmets, loaded gear. Sarah felt their eyes on her, not judgmental, not hostile, just uncertain. To them, she was still an outsider, a civilian, a girl pulled into something she didn't belong to. But beneath their doubt, she sensed respect, the kind given to someone who was walking into danger without a uniform to protect her. The colonel approached, handing her a headset. "Stay close to me. We'll handle the perimeter. You handle the code." She nodded, sliding the earpiece into place. The soft static of comms filled her ear. The language of soldiers clipped, calm, precise. The helicopter lifted into the night. The lights of the base vanished beneath them, replaced by a vast stretch of darkness broken only by moonlight over frozen peaks. Sarah watched it all in silence. Every beat of the rotor blades matched her heartbeat. She could feel it, that strange calm that came before fear, the space between panic and purpose. The colonel leaned closer. "We hit the ground at 0200. No lights, no sound. Once we breach, you'll have 5 minutes to locate the cipher source. After that, we pull out no matter what. And if I don't find it?" He looked straight ahead. "Then the jackal wins." The simplicity of his answer chilled her more than the wind. The mission began under a silent sky. The chopper hovered low over a ridge, snow whipping up in violent spirals. The team jumped first, landing with the silent grace of ghosts. Sarah followed, boots sinking into powder, breath steaming in the air. The landscape stretched white and endless, mountains like black teeth against the horizon. Through the goggles, she could see faint lights flickering below the facility. They moved in formation, steps deliberate, each crunch in the snow perfectly timed. The world felt suspended in silence, as though holding its breath. As they approached the compound, Sarah's pulse quickened. Floodlights glowed faintly behind steel fences. Watchtowers loomed. Shadows moved inside. The colonel signaled with a hand. 2 guards, East Tower, silent takedown. 2 soldiers peeled off and disappeared into the dark. Seconds later, the lights flickered once and went out. No sound, no alarm, just darkness swallowing everything. They slipped through the outer gate like water. Sarah followed close, heart pounding, every nerve alive. Inside, the cold bit harder. The corridors smelled of rust and smoke. Old Soviet tech lined the walls, long dead but humming faintly from stolen power. They passed rooms filled with flickering monitors, cables tangled like veins. Somewhere in the distance, the faint murmur of voices. "Clear left," someone whispered. "Stack up." They reached a steel door. A keypad blinked faintly, coded in Cyrillic. Sarah stepped forward before anyone spoke. "Give me a second." She brushed her gloved fingers over the keys. The pattern struck her immediately, not random. Familiar. The same algorithmic rhythm her mother once used for field encryption. "Codes reversed," she murmured. "Last 3 digits mirror the first." She entered the sequence. The lock clicked open. One of the soldiers glanced at her, impressed. "You sure you're not military?" She managed a faint smile. "Depends on the day." Beyond the door, a corridor stretched downward, colder, darker. The deeper they went, the more Sarah's stomach tightened. The air felt heavier, like the walls themselves remembered violence. They entered a wide chamber lit by flickering fluorescent lights. In the center stood a bank of computers, modern, humming, alive, and standing beside them a shadow. The colonel froze, raising his fist. The team stopped instantly. Sarah squinted through the dim light, and her heart stopped. The man at the console turned slowly, and the years fell away. Scars carved across his cheek, eyes like glass, empty, precise. The jackal. "You're late," he said. His voice was calm, almost amused. "But I knew you'd come, just like your mother." Sarah's breath caught. The sound of his voice ripped open a decade of nightmares. The colonel's rifle came up instantly, hands where I can see them. The jackal smiled faintly. "You'll shoot, Colonel, go ahead," but then she dies just like Catherine. Her body went rigid. He knew exactly how to strike. Behind her, the team fanned out, forming a semicircle. The colonel's voice dropped low through her earpiece. "Donovan, stay back." But she couldn't. She stepped forward. The jackal tilted his head. "You have her eyes, same fire, same mistake thinking courage changes anything." Sarah's hands tightened into fists. "You killed her." He shrugged. "I survived her, that's different." Her pulse thundered in her ears. For years she'd dreamed of this moment, of seeing him again, of what she'd say. But now that he stood before her, calm and real, words weren't enough. "You were a child," he said softly, almost gently. "I warned her that training you would make you dangerous. I was right." She took another step, ignoring the colonel's quiet warning. "You should have killed me too." He smiled, a cold, broken thing. "I tried." The shot came faster than thought, a flash of light, a crack of sound, and chaos erupted. The team fired simultaneously, gunfire tearing through the chamber. Sparks flew, glass shattered, alarms screamed to life. The jackal dove behind the console, vanishing into a back corridor. "Go," the colonel barked. They surged forward. Sarah followed, adrenaline burning through her veins. The corridors blurred around her, shouts, muzzle flashes, the pounding of boots on metal. She rounded a corner just in time to see the jackal disappear through a blast door, sealing it behind him. The colonel cursed. "We'll breach 30 seconds." Sarah pressed a hand to the keypad, scanning it fast. "No time, it's a cipher lock." "Can you break it?" Her mind raced. The pattern, numbers, letters, repeating structure. She closed her eyes. She could hear her mother's voice again, whispering, "Don't look at the code. Feel the rhythm." She started typing, fingers flying. 3 seconds later, the door unlocked with a soft hiss. The colonel blinked. "Remind me never to doubt you." They stormed through. The next room was small, circular, lined with old equipment and a single server glowing red. At its base, a data module pulsing faintly. The jackal was gone, but his message was. Sarah knelt by the console. Lines of code streamed across the screen, encrypted commands counting down. "It's a trigger," she said. "He's activating a transfer." "How long?" 3 minutes. "Can you stop it?" Her jaw clenched. "If I fail, the data goes global." "Then don't fail." Her hands moved fast, decrypting, rerouting, overriding. Every beeping sound felt like a heartbeat. Sweat gathered at her temple despite the cold. Her breath came short, sharp. Then something shifted. The code broke, fragments aligning, revealing a final string, one she recognized. Her mother's signature embedded deep within. She exhaled shakily. "She left me the kill switch." "What?" the colonel asked. "She planned for this. She always knew he'd try again." She entered the last line. The screen flickered once, then went black. The server hummed low and silent. "Transfer terminated," said a voice through comms. "All channels secure." The colonel let out a breath. "Good work." But Sarah stayed still, staring at the screen. Beneath the shutdown prompt, faint text glowed for a brief second. "I'm proud of you." Her eyes filled before she could stop them. She blinked hard, wiped them with the back of her glove. She knew. The colonel rested a hand on her shoulder. She did. Outside, the alarm klaxon began to fade. The wind howled through the breached walls, carrying snow inside like ghosts drifting through the air. Sarah stood slowly, her body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. "It's over." The colonel looked at her. For now. She nodded, but deep inside she knew this was only the beginning, because when one war ends, another always waits. They moved out in silence. The dawn was breaking over the mountains, a pale light spilling across the frozen world. Sarah stopped at the ridge before boarding the helicopter. The horizon burned faint gold, and she whispered softly, "For you, Mom." The colonel paused beside her. "You did what most people can't, Donovan. You faced your ghosts and didn't flinch." She smiled faintly, eyes on the sunrise. "Maybe, but courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway." He nodded once. "Your mother would have agreed." As the helicopter lifted off, Sarah looked down at the fatting compound, smoke rising into morning air, the cold world beneath her slowly shrinking away. She didn't know what waited next, but one thing was certain: she could never go back to being ordinary. Sometimes the past doesn't let you hide. It finds you, tests you, and if you're lucky, it lets you prove who you really are. The hum of the helicopter was softer now, almost peaceful. The world below stretched white and endless, the ruins of the Jackal's compound fatting beneath drifting snow. Sarah sat by the open door, the wind rushing through her hair, her hands still trembling despite the gloves. Around her, the Delta team was silent. No victory cheers, no talk of medals or glory, just quiet breaths and the heavy stillness that follows survival. She'd done it, she stopped the transfer, the code was dead, the mission was over. But as she stared into the endless horizon, something in her refused to settle. It felt too neat, too quiet. Across from her, the colonel watched her with that same unreadable calm. He didn't need to speak. He'd seen it before, the look in someone's eyes after a mission ends but the war inside doesn't. When they landed back at base, the Arctic sun had already begun to fade, sliding into that long twilight that never quite becomes night. Sarah climbed out, boots sinking into snow, lungs filling with cold air that burned like fire. The world smelled like fuel and frost and endings. A medic passed her a blanket she didn't need. Her body wasn't cold. It was her mind that shook. Inside the debriefing tent, the air was warmer, filled with quiet chatter, typing, the low hum of generators. The team spread out, removing helmets, unzipping vests. Every man moved with the careful slowness of people who knew how fragile the space between life and death really was. The colonel motioned for her to sit. "You did well." Sarah lowered herself into the metal chair, fingers tracing the edge of the table. "Then, why doesn't it feel over?" He studied her for a moment. "Because it never really is." She looked up. "You mean the mission?" "I mean the kind of ghosts we deal with." She said nothing. The weight of his words pressed down like snow on branches, quiet but heavy. A tech entered, setting down a tablet. "Sir, we recovered partial fragments from the server before it shut down." "Fragments?" the colonel asked. "Yes, sir. It looks like a secondary transmission was already in progress before the kill switch. We caught only the tail end, routing coordinates, but they're incomplete." Sarah leaned forward. "Show me." The tech turned the screen toward her. A map flickered, lines of data scattered across Europe and the Middle East. Only one sequence was intact: Altair 7. Her eyes narrowed. The name sparked something in her memory, an old file, something her mother once mentioned in passing when Sarah was a child. She had called it a ghost protocol. A hidden operation buried so deep even the agency disavowed it. Sarah's voice came out low. "My mother used that code name once, before she died." The colonel frowned. "You're sure?" "Yes, it was the mission she refused to talk about, the one that ended everything." He exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "Then this isn't over, not by a long shot." A silence settled over the room, the kind that makes time stretch. Sarah's eyes lingered on the flickering coordinates, the incomplete path glowing like a trail only she could read. Later that night, sleep refused to come. She lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling of the temporary barracks. The wind howled outside, brushing against the metal walls like a living thing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face, not the way she remembered it in life, but the way it appeared in flashes during the fight. Fatting, proud, final. She turned over, pressing her fists against her temples. "You knew this would happen," she whispered. "Didn't you, Mom?" The sound of footsteps broke the silence. The colonel stopped at her door. "You awake?" She sat up, barely. He stepped inside, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Figured you might need this." The steam curled in the cold air. She took the cup with a faint smile. "You don't sleep much, do you?" He chuckled. "Sleep is for people who don't remember." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled. Finally, he spoke. "You said your mother mentioned Altair 7. What else did she tell you?" Sarah frowned, eyes distant. "Only once. I must have been 11. She was cleaning her gear late at night. I asked what Altair meant. She said it was a place but not on any map. Then she told me something strange, that if I ever saw that name again, I'd know the truth about her death." The colonel's jaw tightened. "She died in a raid gone wrong, didn't she?" "That's what they told me, but I never believed it." He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "Then maybe it's time we find out what really happened." Sarah looked at him, confusion and fear crossing her face. "You're talking about reopening a blacklisted operation. The agency buried that file for a reason." "I know," he said quietly, "but we've already woken the Jackal's network. Someone wanted those codes for a purpose, and if Altair 7 is connected, we can't afford not to know." Her heartbeat quickened. "So what's next?" He stood, pulling a thin envelope from his jacket. "We move south. There's a NATO intel post outside Krakow. They've got archives your mother helped build before she went dark. If there's anything on Altair 7, it's there." He placed the envelope on the table and turned to leave. "We move at dawn. Pack light." When he was gone, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside were old satellite photos, mission notes, and a faded photograph. Her mother standing with 2 men in tactical gear, their faces blurred out. But in the background, barely visible on the wall behind them, was a symbol. A 7-pointed star. Beneath it, scratched in marker, Altair 7. She traced it with her thumb, her breath catching. Her mother's handwriting. For a long time she sat in silence, the photo trembling slightly in her hands. The past wasn't done with her. Not yet. At dawn, the team moved out, smaller now, stripped to essentials. The Arctic faded behind them as they flew over gray seas and frozen forests. Sarah sat near the cockpit, watching clouds break beneath them. The colonel sat beside her, reviewing the mission file. "Once we hit Krakow," he said, "we're ghosts. No official presence. If this leaks, we'll both disappear off record." Sarah nodded, staring ahead. "I already disappeared the day those helicopters landed." He glanced at her, almost smiling. "You sound like someone who's accepted it." "Maybe I have," she said quietly, "but acceptance doesn't mean peace." The journey stretched long, hours blurring into silence and engine noise. When they finally touched down at the NATO post, night had already fallen. The base was small, discreet, hidden within the outskirts of an abandoned airfield. The officer in charge, a thin man with tired eyes, met them with quiet suspicion. "You're not on the manifest," he said. The colonel slid a classified clearance card across the table. "We were never supposed to be." That was enough. Within minutes they were led down into the archive bunker, a concrete maze of old servers, dusty files, and dim yellow lights. Sarah felt the weight of history pressing in. Every shelf, every folder held pieces of lives erased by time and secrecy. She found the section marked DISAVOWEDOPS. The letters looked almost burned into the metal. She ran her fingers along the drawers until she found it, A7 Alt. Her pulse jumped. Inside, only one file. A thin folder with a single sheet of paper and a flash drive taped to it. She opened the sheet, brief, redacted lines. Operation Altair 7. Objective, extraction and containment. Location classified. Lead operative Catherine Donovan. Status failed. All assets lost. Beneath that, one final handwritten note. Not official, personal. If you're reading this, it means the past has found you again. Don't make my mistake. Trust no one, not even those wearing your flag. Her hands trembled. She knew she'd be betrayed. The colonel stepped beside her, reading over her shoulder. Then whoever killed her wasn't the jackal alone. Sarah looked up slowly. You think someone from her own team. I think this runs deeper than either of us wants to admit. They exchanged a long, silent look, both understanding the weight of what they'd just uncovered. The colonel removed the flash drive, slipping it into a secure reader. The screen flickered, encrypted files, layers upon layers of security. Can you open it? He asked. Sarah took a deep breath, fingers hovering over the keyboard. If she built it, maybe. The code looked different this time, colder, sharper. As she began decrypting, patterns emerged, but not the way she expected. It wasn't a location or name. It was a recording. She pressed play. Static filled the room, then her mother's voice. If this reaches you, Sarah, I'm gone. I hope I'm wrong, but I doubt it. Altair 7 isn't what they said. It wasn't a raid. It was a cover-up, something buried under the ice that shouldn't have existed. The jackal was just the surface. Beneath him, there's a named specter. Find him before he finds you. The recording ended. Silence followed, thick, paralyzing. Sarah couldn't move. Her mother's voice still hung in the air, soft and ghostly. The colonel's voice broke it, Spectre. Sarah's jaw tightened, no record. He shook his head, not in any database I know of. She turned back to the screen. The last line of code flickered faintly, a single coordinate hidden in metadata. She copied it, whispering, then that's where we go next. The colonel hesitated. You realize this isn't official anymore. Whatever this is, it's bigger than a mission. We might be on our own. Sarah's eyes were steady now, the quiet fire her mother once carried burning behind them. I've been on my own for a long time. As they left the bunker, the snow had started falling again, slow, steady, beautiful. Sarah paused at the doorway, looking up at the sky. Her mother's voice echoed softly in her memory. Fear is natural. Courage is acting despite it. She smiled faintly, breath fogging in the cold. Then let's act. The snow had stopped by the time they reached the transport. Dawn was breaking slow and gray, the light stretching across the airfield like an old scar. Sarah stood near the edge of the tarmac, eyes fixed on the horizon. Her mother's voice still echoed in her head, find him before he finds you. The words replayed like a drumbeat, steady and relentless. The colonel approached, his boots crunching softly in the snow. We've traced the coordinates, he said. Northern Italy. Old NATO relay station decommissioned after the Cold War. On paper it's empty. In reality, no one knows who controls it now. Sarah turned toward him, the wind tugging at her hair. Spectre. He nodded, maybe, or maybe just another ghost. They boarded the transport plane in silence. Inside, the hum of the engines filled the space between thoughts. The colonel sat across from her, reviewing the mission outline on a tablet. Sarah didn't need to read it. She learned long ago that missions never go the way they're written. She stared at her hands, steady, calloused, foreign to her now. She still remembered when they shook at the sound of gunfire, when courage was just a word, not a necessity. Do you ever wonder, she asked quietly, how people become what they swore they'd never be? The colonel looked up, every day. Sarah's eyes drifted toward the small window, clouds drifting past like ghosts. I used to think my mother was larger than life, indestructible. Now I realize she was just human, scared, tired, trying to do the right thing. He smiled faintly. That's what made her different. The ones who aren't scared, they're the ones who stop being human. They landed hours later at a small private airfield tucked between Italian hills. The air smelled of pine and distant rain. From above, the old relay station looked like a relic: stone walls, rusted towers, roofs half collapsed. But through the colonel's scope, faint thermal signatures flickered within. "Someone's home," he said. They geared up again, black fatigues, suppressed weapons, comms tuned low. No backup this time, just the two of them. The approach was quiet, every step deliberate. Crows watched from the fence as they crossed the overgrown field. The gate hung crooked, squeaking softly as Sarah pushed it open. The sound felt too loud. Inside, the world was still. Wind whistled through broken windows. Somewhere deeper, a faint hum: machinery, alive. They moved room by room, flashlights cutting through the dust. The walls were covered in old maps and peeling paint. On one table lay fresh gear, rations, ammo, surveillance drives. Whoever was here hadn't left long ago. Sarah crouched near a map pinned to the wall. Red circles marked global cities: Warsaw, London, Riyadh, Tokyo. In the center of them all, Altair 7. Her throat tightened. "This isn't just a base," she whispered. "It's a hub." The colonel examined a stack of files. "Then Spectre isn't working alone." Before Sarah could respond, a faint click echoed from the shadows, the unmistakable sound of a rifle safety released. "Drop it," a voice said, cold and steady. Sarah froze. From the darkness emerged a figure, black combat armor, half mask covering his face. The rifle was leveled squarely at the colonel's chest. "Hands where I can see them." The colonel raised his slowly. Sarah's pulse quickened. Something about the man's stance, precise, military, familiar. "Who are you?" she asked. The man's eyes met hers, sharp and pale. "The question isn't who I am," he said. "It's who sent you." "We're not your enemy," the colonel said evenly. "Everyone says that." His voice had an edge of something, regret maybe. Sarah stepped forward slightly, her voice low, calm. "Spectre." The man hesitated, just a fraction, but enough. She saw it, the flicker of surprise in his eyes. The colonel didn't waste the second. In one motion, he shifted his weight, knocking the rifle aside. The shot went wide, shattering a metal pipe. Steam hissed into the air as they grappled. Sarah moved fast, drawing her sidearm and leveling it. "Enough," she shouted. The man froze, breathing hard, his mask tilted toward her. "You shouldn't be here." "Then why did my mother die trying to find you?" The words stopped him cold. Slowly, he lowered the rifle. "Catherine Donovan," he said quietly. "I warned her not to come, she didn't listen." Sarah's voice cracked. "You were there." He nodded once. "Altair 7. I led the strike team. I was supposed to extract her, not kill her." The colonel's jaw tightened. "Supposed to." "She was betrayed," Spectre said. "Not by me, by someone inside your own command." The silence that followed felt like it could break the walls. Sarah took a step closer, eyes burning. "You're lying." "I wish I was." He reached slowly into his vest and pulled out a small device, a data chip sealed in plastic. "She gave me this before she died. Said one day her daughter would come looking, that you'd know what to do with it." He tossed it onto the floor between them. It slid across the dust. Sarah stared at it, her hand trembling as she bent down to pick it up. Her thumb brushed the casing, her mother's initials scratched faintly into the surface. Her voice broke into a whisper. "Why didn't you bring it to the agency?" Spectre gave a hollow laugh. "Because the agency sent the man who betrayed her. You think they'll protect you now. You're their loose end." The colonel's face hardened. "You're saying the jackal worked for us." "I'm saying he was hired by someone who did." The air felt colder suddenly. Spectre stepped back, lowering his weapon. "They'll come for me soon, for you too. Whatever on that chip, it's not intel, it's a list." Sarah's pulse quickened. "A list of what?" "Names," he said. "People involved in Altair 7, everyone who helped bury it. including your mother's killer." Before she could respond, the distant roar of engines shattered the stillness. Helicopters, multiple, closing fast. Spectre's eyes darted upward, too late. The colonel snapped his radio to life. "We've been burned, move." The first explosion hit the east tower, showering the courtyard with fire and debris. Sarah was thrown to the ground, ears ringing. The colonel grabbed her arm, dragging her toward cover. "Go, go, go." Dust and smoke filled the air. Through it she saw Spectre returning fire, precise, relentless, covering their retreat. He shouted over the chaos, "Get that chip out of here. Don't stop until you know the truth." A rocket slammed into the far wall. The blast threw him backward into the flames. "Spectre," she screamed. The colonel pulled her away. "We have to move." They ran through collapsing corridors, the building groaning under the assault. Every breath burned. Every sound was drowned in the roar of destruction. They burst out the rear exit, sprinting through the smoke toward the ridge. A transport drone hovered beyond the trees, their emergency extraction. As they reached it, Sarah looked back, the relay station engulfed in fire, the sky above it black with smoke. Somewhere in that inferno, the man called Spectre had vanished, taking the truth with him. On board the drone, she collapsed into the seat, coughing, shaking. The colonel secured the hatch, his face streaked with ash. "You okay?" She nodded weakly, clutching the chip to her chest. He said, "It's a list. Then we find out who's on it." The drone lifted off, engines screaming into the night. Below them, the base burned like a dying star, a secret erased from the map. Hours later, high above the clouds, Sarah finally spoke. Her voice was hoarse, hollow. "He saved us." The colonel didn't respond immediately. When he did, his tone was low, reflective. Maybe that was his redemption. Sarah turned the chip over in her hand, watching the faint glint of metal catch the light. Or maybe it was his penance. She looked out the window, the dark sky stretching infinite and empty, the kind of darkness that holds too many secrets. In that silence, she realized something. Every step forward pulled her deeper into her mother's shadow. And maybe that was the point. Maybe redemption wasn't about escaping the past. Maybe it was about walking straight into it, unflinching. The colonel watched her quietly. "When this is over," he said, "what will you do?" She didn't look away from the window. "If it ever ends, maybe I'll finally stop running." He nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure it does." Far below, the fire burned out, leaving only smoke curling into dawn. The world would never know what had happened there, another forgotten battle, another buried truth. But somewhere in the shadows of governments and ghosts, a name had resurfaced. Altair 7 wasn't just an operation. It was a lie built to hide a crime. And now, with the chip clutched in her hands, Sarah held the key to unearthing it. Outside, the horizon turned gold. A new day, a fragile temporary peace. But peace was never permanent. Sarah closed her eyes, whispering to herself almost like a prayer. "You were right, Mom. Fear is natural, but so is the fight that comes after." The drone sped east, carrying her toward the next truth waiting to be uncovered, and the next ghost she would have to face. The hum of the drone faded into the background, replaced by the rhythmic pulse of Sarah's heartbeat. She sat strapped into the narrow seat, staring down at the small data chip resting in her gloved palm. It looked ordinary, dull silver, unassuming. Yet it felt heavier than anything she'd ever held. Inside it were names, truths, and maybe the reason her mother had died. The colonel sat across from her, face lit faintly by the flicker of instrument panels. His silence wasn't the comfortable kind anymore. It was guarded, thoughtful, as if he, too, was beginning to see the cracks forming beneath their mission. "How soon can we read it?" he asked quietly. Sarah's eyes stayed on the chip. "Depends on what she built to protect it. My mother never did anything halfway." He nodded. "Neither do you." The compliment landed like a stone. She wasn't sure it was meant to comfort her. The drone tilted slightly, descending through clouds toward a secure NATO airstrip somewhere in Germany. Below, the night stretched endless, empty fields, a few scattered lights, the quiet illusion of peace. As they landed, a team of technicians rushed forward, guiding the craft into a hangar. No insignia, no questions. The colonel's influence carried weight, even off the record. Inside, the hangar lights flickered on, washing everything in sterile white. Sarah stepped out, Chip still clutched tight. Her boots echoed on concrete as she followed the colonel through a maze of corridors into a small analysis lab. Banks of screens lined the walls, wires snaking across the floor. A single technician waited, a woman in her 30s with cropped hair and sharp eyes. "Colonel," she greeted, nodding slightly. "I was told this was priority 0. "It is," he replied. "You're clear on the blackout." She smirked faintly. "You don't need to remind me. Nothing leaves this room." The colonel gestured to Sarah. "She runs point, you assist." The tech raised an eyebrow. "A civilian." Sarah's voice was calm but edged. "Not tonight." She connected the data chip to the terminal. The screen came alive as strings of encrypted code, symbols flashing too fast to follow. The technician frowned, adjusting filters, running decryption tools. None worked. Sarah leaned closer. "Stop." The tech froze. "It's not machine encryption," Sarah murmured. "It's linguistic." The colonel's brow furrowed. "Explain." "My mother was a linguist before intelligence. She thought in patterns, letters, sounds, symmetries. She encoded data inside phonetic rhythms. The algorithms won't see it because they're listening to the wrong language." The technician hesitated. "Then what do we use?" Sarah smiled faintly, more sadness than pride. "We use me." For the next 2 hours, the room was silent except for the hum of machines and the occasional click of keys. Sarah worked like someone possessed, muttering softly to herself, tracing lines of text, rearranging characters, listening rather than reading. Every few minutes she'd stop, stare at the screen, then type again, faster this time, as if following a voice only she could hear. At last the screen froze. The code unfolded like a blooming flower, revealing a series of encrypted documents and one video file. The colonel straightened. "Open it." Sarah hesitated. Her finger hovered over the key. "If my mother hid this, it wasn't meant to be seen easily." The colonel's tone softened. "You've come this far, trust her." She pressed play. The video flickered to life. The footage was grainy, the color faded. A cold wind howled faintly through the mic. And then her mother appeared, Catherine Donovan, dressed in field gear, eyes tired but fierce, face streaked with dirt and snow. "If this message is retrieved, it means Altair 7 has failed," she said. "And if it's my daughter watching, Sarah, I'm sorry." Sarah's breath hitched. "You were right to run. You were right to want a normal life. But normal was never going to last, not for us. The people we trusted turned our mission into something else. They used me to cover it, and they'll use you to finish it if you're not careful." Her mother's eyes shifted, as if hearing something off camera. "The name you need to remember isn't the Jackal, it's Greystone." The colonel stiffened. "He's inside the command network. Senior clearance. He ordered the hit that killed me, then erased the file. If he's still active, he's your enemy. And if you find him, don't try to bring him in. Just end it." The footage wavered, her mother's face flickering through static. "Sarah, courage isn't about how long you fight. It's about why you start again when you've already lost. Find the truth. Then decide what you'll do with it. I love you." The screen went black. No one spoke for several seconds. The only sound was Sarah's breathing, shallow, uneven. The colonel finally exhaled, rubbing his jaw. "Greystone. You know him." He hesitated. "I know of him. Former Joint Intelligence Directorate, Black Operations Clearance. He retired 5 years ago." "Or he disappeared," Sarah said bitterly. The technician looked between them. If that's true, you're talking about someone way above our pay grade, a ghost inside the system. Sarah stood slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. Then we find the ghost. The colonel shook his head. You don't hunt someone like Greystone Donovan, you survive him. She turned to him, eyes steady. My mother didn't, I won't stop now. He didn't argue. Maybe because he knew she was right. Maybe because he saw something in her he recognized, that same quiet fire her mother once carried. By dawn, they were already moving again. The technician wiped the servers, destroying all traces of the decryption. Before they left, she handed Sarah a small device. Tracker Scrambler. If he's half as connected as he used to be, he'll find you before you find him. This might buy you time. Sarah thanked her, slipping it into her vest. Outside, the sky was pale blue, the air sharp with winter. They boarded a small, unmarked jeep headed south toward Munich, where Greystone's last known network had surfaced years earlier under a private security shell company. The colonel drove, his expression unreadable. Sarah watched the road, the blur of trees and cold light. Every mile felt heavier. Why didn't you tell me you knew him? She asked finally. He didn't look at her, because some names are better left buried. And yet here we are. He sighed. Greystone trained me once, long before I met your mother. He taught me how to lead, how to think 2 steps ahead of everyone else. He also taught me how to lie. Sarah's hands tightened on her lap. Did he lie to her too? Yes, the colonel said softly. Worse than that, he made her believe she was saving lives when she was cleaning up his mistakes. Silence fell again. As dusk settled, they reached the outskirts of Munich, old industrial zones now turned into private compounds. The colonel parked near an abandoned rail yard overlooking a cluster of concrete buildings surrounded by motion sensors. That's his company, he said quietly. Greystone Dynamics. On the surface, it's logistics and communications. Underneath, weaponized data, the kind that topples governments without firing a bullet. Sarah's pulse quickened. And you think he's inside? He nodded, or watching from somewhere close. They set up surveillance from an old control tower overlooking the compound. Through the scope, Sarah counted guards too disciplined to be civilians. Ex-military. A private army guarding one man's secret empire. Hours passed. The cold crept into their bones. Then movement. A convoy pulled in, 3 black SUVs. One stopped near the main entrance. The man who stepped out was older, tall, his gray hair slicked back. Even from a distance, authority radiated from him. The colonel muttered under his breath, "That's him." Sarah's stomach knotted. The man who ordered her mother's death. The man her mother once trusted. She lowered the binoculars slowly. He's real. Too real, the colonel said. And untouchable. If we go through official channels, he'll erase everything before we even sign the papers. Then we don't go through channels. He glanced at her. You're talking about going rogue. Sarah's eyes didn't waver. My mother died following orders. Maybe it's time I stopped taking them. The colonel stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Then we do this right. No noise, no mercy. They waited until nightfall. The city lights flickered in the distance as a soft rain began to fall, masking sound and movement. Sarah assembled her gear quietly, sidearm, suppressor, comm link, a small drive to extract data if they reached the main servers. Every motion felt automatic now, her body remembering what her heart still feared. Before they moved out, the colonel stopped her. You know, once we cross that fence, there's no going back. She looked at him, calm but resolute. There never was. They slipped into the darkness, moving like shadows through the rain. Each step closer to the compound was a heartbeat louder in Sarah's chest. She could almost hear her mother's voice whispering through the storm, courage isn't in the weapon. It's in the hand that holds steady when the truth hurts most. They reached the fence, cut the wire and slipped through. Somewhere beyond those walls waited Greystone. and the truth that would either set her free or destroy her completely. Rain whispered against metal and concrete, soft but relentless. Each drop struck like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Sarah crouched behind a generator, water dripping from the brim of her hood, eyes locked on the illuminated entrance to Greystone Dynamics. Beyond that door was the man who'd murdered her mother's past and rewritten her future. Beside her, the colonel checked his watch. One guard rotation every 5 minutes. Cameras sweep clockwise. We move on the next gap. She nodded silently, tightening her gloves. Her fingers brushed against the hilt of her mother's combat knife, still marked with the faint initials. KD. It was the only piece of home she had left. The rain made it slick, but the weight felt grounding. When the colonel gave the signal, they moved. The fence gave way with a low snap. Boots splashed in puddles as they crossed the outer yard, ducking beneath pipes and broken scaffolding. The world smelled like oil and rust. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, a low, heavy growl that swallowed their footsteps. Sarah's heart pounded, but her breathing stayed steady. Fear wasn't new anymore. It was familiar, an old companion that whispered but no longer controlled her. They reached the side door, steel reinforced. The colonel crouched, connecting a compact bypass unit. Sparks flared briefly, then the lock clicked. "Go," he whispered. Inside, the air was colder, humming faintly with the sound of servers. Blue light pulsed along the corridor walls, the rhythm of machines breathing. They moved in silence, weapons raised, scanning every corner. A voice crackled faintly through a nearby intercom, static and murmured commands. Somewhere above them, men were awake. The colonel pointed left. "Server rooms 2 levels down. Greystone's office is top floor. We hit the core first." Sarah nodded, following his lead through narrow halls lined with glass panels and digital maps of global networks. The deeper they went, the more the air changed, sterile, mechanical, almost suffocating. When they reached the lower level, the corridor opened into a wide chamber filled with blinking servers and cables that glowed like veins. Sarah's gaze swept across the room, at least 4 guards, armed, patrolling slowly. The colonel motioned for cover. "We'll have to take them silent." Sarah exhaled softly, centering herself. Every instinct screamed for caution, but her training, her mother's training, whispered otherwise. She moved first. One guard passed near a pillar. In a single fluid motion, Sarah stepped out, wrapped an arm around his neck and pressed her hand over his mouth. The struggle was brief. The body lowered quietly to the floor. The colonel glanced at her, half surprised, half impressed. They moved through the shadows, eliminating the rest with silent precision until the room fell still again. Only the hum of the machines remained. Sarah approached the main terminal, slipping a drive into the port. Lines of encrypted data flooded the screen. "I'm in," she murmured. The colonel watched the door. "You've got 3 minutes." Her fingers moved quickly, breaking firewalls, rerouting pathways, searching for one word: Greystone. When it appeared, her breath caught. A directory of classified projects. Dozens, but one stood out, marked red, Alt-7 Resurrect. Her pulse quickened. "He's rebuilding Altair 7. The colonel turned sharply. "That's impossible." "No," she whispered. "He's digitizing it, weaponizing the data into an AI-driven assault protocol. The same encryption my mother created, now twisted into something else." Suddenly, a voice echoed behind them. "Impressive, Miss Donovan, but I expected no less from Catherine's daughter." They spun around. Greystone stood in the doorway, tall, composed, a black coat draped over his shoulders like a mantle. His hair was silver now, his face calm, almost kind. But his eyes, they were hollow. The colonel raised his rifle. "Don't move." Greystone smiled faintly. "If you shoot me, Colonel Hayes, you'll never know who really gave the order." Sarah froze. "You know him." The colonel's grip tightened on the weapon. "I trained under him." Greystone stepped closer, hands at his sides. Trained. No, you obeyed just as Catherine did, just as you're making her daughter do now. Don't twist this, Hayes said. Greystone's eyes flicked to Sarah. Do you even know why she died? Sarah's voice shook. Because you betrayed her. He smiled. No, because she hesitated. She believed there were lines we shouldn't cross. But war doesn't wait for conscience, Miss Donovan. It rewards the ones willing to become monsters for peace. His calmness chilled her more than any threat could. Hayes stepped forward. You murdered one of the best operatives we had. I ended a liability, Greystone replied. Her compassion made her dangerous. It was only a matter of time before she exposed everything. And if I hadn't done it, the system you serve would've. Sarah's hand trembled near her weapon. You're lying. He tilted his head. Then why did they send him to bring you in? Her eyes flicked to Hayes. What does he mean? Greystone's smile widened, cruel and knowing. Do you think he came alone? He was ordered to retrieve you to secure the encryption key you carry. He wasn't supposed to tell you the truth, just like I wasn't supposed to tell your mother. Sarah turned toward the colonel, her pulse roaring. Is that true? Hayes's silence said enough. She stepped back, shaking her head. You knew. He tried to reach for her. Sarah, listen to me. It wasn't like that. Greystone's voice cut through him. It was exactly like that. The same chain of command, the same illusion of choice. She's just another operation to you, isn't she? Shut up, Hayes snapped, raising his rifle. But Sarah's voice was quiet, trembling with fury and heartbreak. You used me. I protected you, he said. If I hadn't played along, you'd have been dead before the first extraction. Her throat tightened. You could have told me the truth. He hesitated, lowering his weapon slightly. I wanted to, but the orders. The same orders that killed my mother, she whispered. The silence that followed was unbearable. The hum of servers filled the void, steady and cold. Greystone watched with quiet satisfaction. You see, Miss Donovan, loyalty is just a slower form of death. You can die believing in someone or live knowing what they really are. Sarah drew her weapon, pointing it straight at him. You don't get to talk about loyalty. He smiled, calm even now. Then what will you do? Kill me and become her, or walk away and let it happen again? Her hand shook. Her finger brushed the trigger. She could feel her heart splitting in two, rage and reason tearing at each other. Behind her, Hayes spoke softly. Don't do it. Why not? She snapped. Because that's what he wants. He wants another ghost to bury. You're not him. You're not me. You're her daughter. The words hit harder than any bullet. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. She saw her mother's face in her mind, steady, brave, alive. Then Greystone's smirk cut through it like glass. Her voice came out low, broken. You killed her because she still believed people were worth saving. He said nothing. She took a step closer. I'm not her, I don't forgive. The silence stretched, then a single gunshot. The echo lingered through the steel corridors, swallowed by the sound of rain outside. Greystone's body hit the floor, eyes wide, disbelief frozen in them. Hayes lowered his rifle slowly. He'd fired. Sarah stood motionless, her gun still raised, her breath uneven. Why? He didn't look at her. Because you shouldn't have to carry that weight, not her death, not his. She felt the tears before she realized they'd fallen. She lowered the weapon, the anger fatting into something colder, grief, maybe, or emptiness. Hayes walked past her to the terminal, pulling the drive. We take this, proof of what he built, of who covered it. Sarah nodded faintly, eyes fixed on Greystone's body. For all his words about control, he died like anyone else, small, silent, human. They set the charges on the servers and moved out. The explosions followed seconds later, thunder merging with rain as the facility erupted in fire. Outside, the air smelled of smoke and ozone. The storm had eased, leaving only the soft patter of fatting rain. Sarah stood on the ridge, watching the flames consume the compound. Hayes joined her, exhausted. "You did what had to be done," he said. She shook her head. "We did what we were forced to." He looked at her, the faintest shadow of guilt in his eyes. "There's a difference." "Not anymore." They stood in silence, watching another secret burn away into the night sky. Finally Sarah spoke, a whisper carried on the wind. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." Hayes turned toward her, but she was already walking away down the ridge, into the gray light of dawn. Her footsteps were steady, her heart heavy but sure. She wasn't running anymore. Not from her past, not from her pain, not from the ghosts that shaped her. Because some wars aren't fought for nations or commands. They're fought to remember who you are when the lies fall silent. And as the sun rose over the smoldering ruins of Greystone Dynamics, Sarah Donovan disappeared into the horizon. No longer the freshman they once called from a university courtyard, but the woman who had answered the call that changed everything. The fire had burned through the night. By morning, nothing remained of Greystone Dynamics but twisted metal and smoke curling into a sky the color of ash. Sarah watched from a distance, hood pulled low, rifle slung across her shoulder, the flames reflected in her eyes. She didn't say a word. Behind her, Colonel Hayes stood silent, his face gray with exhaustion and regret. They buried another secret, but this one had teeth. Greystone was dead, yet the storm he'd unleashed had just begun. At dawn, military drones began circling overhead. Not rescue, surveillance. Hayes checked his handheld. "We've been flagged, classified level 7 breach. They're marking us rogue." Sarah's voice was quiet, meaning the same agency that trained me just issued a kill order. He didn't need to say it out loud. She was the target too. They moved fast, packing only what they could carry. Within the hour they were miles away, traveling by forest trails and back roads. No GPS, no comms. Silence was survival now. By nightfall, they reached an abandoned farmhouse tucked deep in the Bavarian woods. The place smelled of dust and decay, but it was shelter. Hayes secured the perimeter while Sarah started a fire in the stone hearth, her hands trembling not from cold, but from the weight of everything. When the flames caught, the shadows on the walls began to move, flickering like ghosts. Hayes dropped into the chair across from her, unzipping his vest. "We need to go dark. New identities, new route out of Europe." Sarah stared into the fire. "And then what?" He hesitated. "We live." Her laugh was soft but bitter. "Live after this, after everything we've seen." He said nothing. She leaned forward, eyes glinting in the firelight. "My mother's gone. Greystone's dead. And whoever ordered this still sits behind a desk pretending nothing happened. We live and they keep winning." Hayes rubbed his face with a weary hand. "You're not responsible for saving the world, Donovan." "Maybe not," she whispered, "but I'm responsible for finishing what they started." He looked at her, and for a brief moment he saw Catherine Donovan again, not in face but in fire. "Your mother would have said the same thing," he murmured. "She did." Silence settled again, the fire crackling softly between them. Outside, the wind howled like something alive. Finally, Hayes stood and handed her a small device, the last encrypted drive from Greystone servers. "You were right about one thing," he said. "Altair 7 wasn't just an operation. It was a cover for something bigger. This drive might tell us what." Sarah took it, turning it over in her hands. "If we open it, they'll trace us." "I'll handle the trace," he said. "You handle the truth." For a long moment she just stared at it, this small piece of metal that somehow carried the ghosts of everyone she'd lost. Then she plugged it into her old field laptop. The screen blinked once, twice, then filled with symbols. Not code this time. Coordinates. Her brow furrowed. "This isn't a network, it's a map." "Where?" She zoomed in slowly. "Northern Syria, a no-fly zone. There's a structure buried beneath an old communications bunker." Hayes exhaled through his teeth. Buried. Deep, she said. Looks like it was sealed decades ago. He frowned. Why would Greystone lead us there? Because whatever Altair 7 really was, it's still down there. The fire popped behind them, sending sparks into the air. For a while, neither spoke. Then Hayes said quietly, "If we go, there's no coming back." Sarah looked up at him, eyes calm but unyielding. "We already crossed that line the moment those helicopters landed at my university." He almost smiled. "You sound like her again." She looked away. Maybe she never left. They left the farmhouse before sunrise, driving an unmarked truck through back roads toward the southern coast. The journey took days, sleeping in shifts, stealing fuel, avoiding checkpoints. Sarah barely spoke. When she did, it was short, direct, focused. Hayes didn't push. At the edges of Greece, they traded the truck for a rusted fishing vessel that carried them across rough seas under false names. The water was black and endless. Sarah stood at the bow, wind tearing through her hair, watching the horizon. Hayes joined her. "You ever think about what comes after?" She didn't turn. "After what?" "This." She let the question hang for a while before answering. "If we make it that far, maybe I'll start over, teach. My mother wanted that once. She said every soldier dreams of silence, even if they never find it." He nodded. "And you?" "I stopped dreaming the night they called my name over the loudspeaker." They reached the Syrian coast under the cover of darkness. The landscape was endless sand and fractured ruins, the air thick with dust and memory. They moved inland, guided by the coordinates until they reached the edge of an abandoned communications base, or what was left of it. Steel towers lay half buried, concrete walls cracked and eroded by time. But beneath it all, hidden beneath layers of rock and sand, was a sealed bunker door marked with a faded insignia, Alt 7. Sarah brushed the sand from the letters, her heart pounding. "It's real." Hayes crouched beside her, and still locked. They worked in silence, bypassing the old systems with portable generators. When the door finally gave, a wave of cold air rushed out, thick, stale, ancient. The tunnels inside smelled of rust and decay. They descended slowly, lights sweeping across walls lined with cables and old machinery. The deeper they went, the more it felt like walking into the past. At the lowest level they found it, a large chamber lit by a single flickering light. In the center stood a massive console surrounded by glass tanks, each filled with murky liquid and fragments of machinery. Sarah stepped closer, reading the faded labels on the tanks. Cognitive mapping, behavioral encoding, neural sync arrays. Her stomach turned. This wasn't communications, this was human testing. Hayes's voice was low. Greystone didn't just want control of data, he wanted control of people. She moved toward the main console, fingers trembling as she wiped dust from the screen. It flickered weakly, booting to life. Lines of data scrolled across the surface, followed by a single file labeled K. Donovan Prototype. Sarah's blood went cold. "Hayes, this is her file." He stepped closer. "What are you saying?" She wasn't just a field agent, she was the test subject. Altair 7 wasn't a mission, it was an experiment. The screen displayed her mother's image, medical scans, neural charts, code overlays. Notes beneath. Subject exhibits enhanced cognitive link. Memory retention exceeds baseline. Ethical termination recommended. Sarah covered her mouth, trembling. They used her. Hayes's face hardened, then killed her when she refused to continue. Tears welled in her eyes. She stared at the screen, her mother's face froze in mid-expression, calm, composed, unaware she'd been turned into data. "She tried to warn me," Sarah whispered. "She said the truth would destroy everything." And now she understood why. A noise echoed down the corridor, faint but close. Hayes raised his rifle. "We're not alone." Voices distant but growing. Military boots on metal floors. Sarah grabbed the drive, pulling the data from the console. They tracked us. Hayes checked the tunnel. You get out, I'll hold them off. No. Sarah. I'm not leaving anyone behind again. The footsteps grew louder. Shadows flickered at the tunnel entrance. Hayes gave a grim smile. You're your mother's daughter. They moved together one last stand. Hayes took the right flank, Sarah the left. The first squad entered, flashlights slicing through the dark. The gunfire was deafening. Echoes of chaos, sparks raining from the ceiling. Sarah moved like instinct, firing, shifting, reloading, every motion precise. Hayes covered her, calling positions, holding the line. But there were too many. A bullet caught Hayes in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Sarah dragged him behind a crate, pressing a hand to the wound. Stay with me. He gritted his teeth. Get the data out. Not without you. Donovan, he gasped, blood seeping through his vest. Some fights aren't meant to be won, just finished. Tears streaked her dirt-covered face. Don't you dare die on me. He smiled faintly, eyes glazing. Tell her she was right. Then his hand went limp. Sarah froze, the sound of her heartbeat louder than the gunfire. She wanted to scream, but silence filled her instead, a silence sharp enough to break her in half. Then something inside her changed. She stood, calm, cold, unstoppable. She emptied her magazine into the tunnel, suppressing fire as she grabbed the drive and sprinted for the exit. The chamber behind her collapsed in fire and debris, sealing Hayes's body beneath tons of steel. When she reached the surface, the night was burning. Helicopters circled overhead, spotlights tearing through the dust. She ran through the ruins, every muscle screaming, her mother's voice echoing faintly through memory. Fear is natural, courage is acting despite it. By the time the first missile hit the bunker, Sarah was already gone, a ghost moving through darkness, clutching the drive that held everything. Her mother's truth, her colonel's sacrifice, the proof of what the world wasn't ready to face. She didn't stop running until the horizon turned pale with morning. And when the sun rose, she looked back once at the smoke rising from the ruins, at the ghost she'd left behind, and whispered, "It's not over." Then she turned away, disappearing into the dawn. The world was quiet again, too quiet, the kind of quiet that follows fire when the smoke still clings to your lungs and the earth feels like it's holding its breath. Sarah walked alone through a valley of sand and silence. The ruins of Altair 7 smoldered behind her, a scar across the horizon. Her body ached, her clothes torn and blood-streaked, but her grip on the encrypted drive never loosened. That small, silver piece of truth, soaked in sacrifice, was all she had left of Hayes, of her mother, of everything she used to believe in. By the time she reached the border town, the sun had already burned half the sky to gold. She passed through empty streets where children played barefoot beside rusted tanks, where old men stared at her like they'd seen ghosts before. In a way, they had. She moved like one, quiet, watchful, carrying something too heavy for words. She found a safe house through an old contact, a woman with tired eyes who asked no questions. Inside, Sarah collapsed into a chair, unwrapping the drive with shaking hands. The weight of it pressed against her palm like judgment. She connected it to her tablet, heart hammering as the files opened. What she saw wasn't data. It was evidence, names, documents, signatures, wire transfers. The truth her mother died for. The network of power that had turned soldiers into test subjects, loyalty into leverage, and conscience into collateral. Altair 7 had been designed to map human behavior, to predict it, control it. The experiment had failed, but the idea survived. They'd turned it into a digital doctrine, a blueprint for manipulation. Politicians, commanders, agencies, the same people sworn to protect freedom had been quietly engineering obedience. Her hands trembled. "You built monsters," she whispered. She copied the files, encrypting them again, preparing to send them to the only person she still trusted, an investigative journalist her mother once mentioned. Someone outside the chain, outside the flags. But even as she typed, her instincts screamed. She wasn't alone. A reflection flickered in the cracked window, movement in the alley. She reached for her weapon just as the door splintered. Two men in black tactical gear rushed in. No insignia, no hesitation. Sarah fired first. The shots were quick, surgical, one to the chest, one to the leg. Both dropped before they could return fire. The silence after was deafening, broken only by her ragged breathing. She grabbed the drive and ran, heart pounding as she slipped through the back exit and into the maze of narrow streets. Dust rose with every step. Voices shouted somewhere behind her. She kept running. Every corner felt like a memory, her father's voice teaching her to breathe, her mother whispering codes under candlelight, Hayes's hand on her shoulder telling her to trust herself. Every lesson, every loss now leading her here. At the end of the street stood an old radio tower, half collapsed but still functional. She climbed it fast, ignoring the pain in her legs, the blood soaking through her sleeve. At the top, she found the terminal still active, rusted but alive. She connected the drive and uploaded everything to a dozen global news outlets, encrypted backups, whistleblower archives. Each file flashed one by one, progress bars inching upward like dawn itself. Voices shouted below, the men had found her. She watched the final upload complete, the message on the screen glowing faintly. Transmission successful. She smiled just barely. You can't bury the truth forever. Then she turned, drawing her weapon, as the first of the soldiers reached the top. The fight was fast, desperate, brutal, steel on steel. Muzzle flashes lighting up the rusted platform. She moved like a ghost, every movement guided by instinct, her mother's rhythm in her breath, her colonel's precision in her aim. She took them down one by one until the last man fell, but not before a single shot tore through her side. The impact spun her against the railing. She gasped, pressing a hand to the wound. Blood poured through her fingers, warm against the cold metal. The drive hung from the terminal, still glowing faintly like a heartbeat. Below, sirens wailed, military vehicles closing in. Sarah sank to her knees, back against the railing, eyes lifting to the sunrise. The horizon glowed orange and red, the same colors that once painted the Arctic snow the morning after her first mission. She laughed softly. It sounded almost like peace. Her calm crackled suddenly, faint, broken, a voice, Hayes's voice. She froze. Donovan. Her breath caught, you're alive. The voice was faint, ghostly. Not for long. You did it, didn't you? Her eyes filled. The files are out, the world will know. A pause, good, then maybe we didn't die for nothing. Static swallowed the rest. She pressed the earpiece closer, desperate. Hayes. Only silence. She closed her eyes, tears cutting through the dirt on her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered, for believing in me when I didn't. The wind howled through the tower, tugging at her hair. She could hear helicopters in the distance now, growing louder, closer. But she didn't move. Not this time. Not anymore. Because running was what they'd made her do, what fear had demanded. But this was choice. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her mother's pendant, the one with the microchip hidden inside. She opened it slowly, gazing at the tiny engraving beneath the surface. For S. Her breath hitched. I found it, Mom. The sound of rotor blades drew nearer. Dust and sunlight swirled together in the wind. She pressed the pendant to her chest, whispering through cracked lips, sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Her grip loosened. The pendant fell into her lap, catching the rising light. When the soldiers reached the top minutes later, they found the platform empty. Only the wind, the pendant, and a faint trail of blood leading toward the dawn. Some said she fell, others said she escaped. But months later, when classified leaks appeared across networks worldwide, names, operations, recordings, They all carried the same encryption signature, the same unseen hand. The headlines read, "The Altar Files. Truth has a name." And buried deep in the metadata of every file, invisible to the untrained eye, was one short line of code. K. Donovan sequence alive. No one could trace it, no one could silence it. Across the world, small changes began to happen, inquiries reopened, black budgets exposed, whispers of justice rising through the static. Somewhere far from it all, in a quiet village by the sea, a woman with auburn hair walked the shoreline at dawn. A faint scar ran along her side, half hidden beneath a loose jacket. She carried no weapon, no uniform, just the pendant resting against her heart. When the wind shifted, she turned her face toward the horizon, the same golden light as before, but softer now, free. She smiled just once, then kept walking. Her name was gone from every record, every database, every classified file. But in the shadows where truth survived, her story lived, whispered among soldiers, agents, and dreamers who still believed courage meant something. They called her by many names: the ghost of Altair, the woman from Blackwood, the daughter of the operative. But those who knew, truly knew, spoke her real name with quiet reverence. Sarah Donovan, the girl who carried her mother's legacy, her colonel's sacrifice, and her own silent war. The one who stood up when silence was easier. And somewhere, in a world still learning how to face its reflection, her mother's final words lingered like an echo carried by wind. Courage isn't born, it's remembered.